Right, so if you're struggling to find your way around all the different variations of Adidas's new F50 boots, I don't blame you, because there are quite a lot. So in today's video, I'm gonna tell you the details and also highlight the differences between the top-end Elite model, the Pro, the League, and the Club version to hopefully help you decide which one of these might be the one for you. And also, I'm gonna tell you why this, the Pro, might be one of the best takedown versions Adidas has ever done, in my book at least, in terms of replicating what's on the top-end Elite model. So, let's dive into it. But let's start with the Elite boots, where you have a couple of options. So there is the regular F50 Elite, low cut with laces that will cost you 260 euros. There's the laceless version of that, the Elite LL, 270 euros. And then there's also this high cut women's version that's also 260 euros. And obviously there are a couple of differences, but what they have in common is that they all come with the Fiber Touch upper, this engineered mesh upper that does admittedly out of the box feel, just a little bit more stiff and plasticky than I had anticipated, but thankfully it breaks in rather quickly and becomes pretty, if not really soft, really quickly, so it shouldn't be that big of a problem. Now on top of that, you have the sprint web texture. It's a micro texture that's a little bit gritty, and it just adds this feeling of, some sort of texture on the ball. It's not sticky, but it just adds that little extra something. And for some inexplicable reason, it's just slightly grittier on the laceless model than the other two. But what the boots don't have in common is when it comes to the tongues. So basically the F50 Elite here has the so-called compression fit tongue, which is this really thin, neoprene-like, slightly stretchy tongue that kind of wraps around your foot and really takes and stretches around the shape of your foot. Feels really nice. Whereas the other two models have this knitted collar, and obviously for the women's version, a high-cut sock as well. So no compression fit tongue there, it's just all, the more traditional knit feel that you might know. But now that I have the women's version in front of me, you might be wondering, why is the women's version a high cut? Well, the thing is that while Adidas were developing the F50, they talked to a lot of players, and the trend was that most of the male players preferred a low-cut version, whereas a majority of the female players preferred the fit and feel of a high-cut boot, so that's what Adidas made. Now, this thing is obviously a knitted collar, as you would know. It has this, trademark, very smooth, sock-like transition from boot to foot. And if you've ever worn any of Nike's high-cut boots, in particular, of course, the Mercurial Superflies, it will be a pretty familiar sensation. Now, apart from that, obviously, you have a couple of visual differences from the unisex boots, but otherwise, they are technically the same. So don't let the fact that it's called a women's version kind of scare you if you are a male player and you want an F50 with a sock. There's not really a difference tech-wise from the other boots, except of course for one thing, and that is the insoles, and this is pretty cool actually. Normally, of course, in traditional F50 manner, you get two insoles. There's the default speed insole, which is nice and thin and it makes you feel really connected to the boot. But you also get a replacement insole called Comfort. It's a little bit thicker, it weighs a little bit more, and it gives you the option to replace the insole if you just want a smoother ride. Now, on the women's version here, you also get the speed insole as the replacement insole, but the default insole in the boot is called extra cushioning. It's blue, so you can tell the difference, but also it is just a little bit wider in the midfoot and the heel to add a little bit more support for players that have a higher arch and a little bit of a thinner heel. And I guess research has showed Adidas that that's what most female players have. So again, if you really want the F50 with the sock, just forget all the macho bullshit and just don't be scared. It's a really solid option. But another common thing for the three boots is the FG outsole. They all share the Sprint Frame 360 outsole with, the combination of these hybrid studs with a flat and conical half for a bit of cutting and rotational movement, and the more acceleration-minded flatter studs in the forefoot. The F50 Elite also comes in an SG version, and then, of course, there is the newly developed AG traction plate, which is a very welcome addition. I've been screaming for this for years, and now they've actually given us a new AG outsole with 13 studs instead of 12, with studs that are obviously, most of them are conical. You have this pivot zone in the forefoot, but the studs are also ever so slightly shorter. And that does make it a little bit safer to use on at least modern artificial pitches. Plus, it's actually been developed to withstand a little bit more of the abrasion coming when you play on AG pitches, so it should be more durable than wearing your FG boots as well. And you keep your warranty if you wear AG dedicated boots on artificial grass. So to keep this in mind, very, very welcome addition that if you only can buy one boot playing on both FG and AG pitches, this could double as an FG boot as well, if the pitch isn't super soft. So super welcome addition here. But AG tooling, AG traction plate, great to see. So basically, no matter if you're into the standard low cut with laces option, a high cut sock, or laceless, the F50 Elite gives you options. And on top of that, it's a really good boot. I like to wear it. It's great that they continue this F50 DNA with a very no-nonsense, minimal, lightweight speed boot feel. We're talking 178 grams and 185 grams here. So it's a really lightweight, and it definitely competes with every other speed boot on the market. It just works. Very nice. And then you have the F50 Pro, which, as I mentioned in the beginning, might be one of the best first takedown models I remember seeing in the last many years, because on paper at least you get many of the same things as you get on the Elite. Fiber touch upper, sprint web texture, compression fit tongue, and an outsole that has the same stud shape and configuration as on the Elite. And it's 110 euros cheaper at 150 euros. So what's the catch, Jay? Well, to be fair, there are a couple. We can start with the outsole, which is called the Sprint Shell 360 instead of Sprint Frame. 360, that's difficult to say. You get what I mean. Basically, it's a plate that doesn't have that one-piece external heel count. Instead, it's just an individual piece of plastic. And also, it's a little bit thicker, it's a little bit wider, and it's a little bit heavier. And that also affects the shape of the boot, because the Pro is just a little bit wider through the midfoot, and especially also through the heel compared to the Elite model, which just, it gives a little bit more volume there, and it doesn't offer the same snug, very streamlined sensation as you get in the Elite. That's a matter of preference, so that's up to you what you prefer, but I just wanted to mention it. Obviously also the sprint web texture, it only covers the lower part of the forefoot, so there's nothing like up here as you get on the Elite. The laces are a little bit thicker, and the compression fit tongue to me is still pretty stretchy, but there seems to be a little bit of a difference when it comes to either the thickness or just like how premium it feels around your foot. It's not bad, but it doesn't feel one-to-one either. Finally, there's also the liner in the heel. It has this like suede-like sensation to it, but for some reason it doesn't feel as fluffy. It's a little bit thicker, and it also doesn't have these little grip coatings that kind of hold your foot in place as it starts to move. It's a minor thing, but all in all, I would say that it does feel a lot like the Elites, but you do obviously also feel the differences on foot. But whether that's enough for you to just completely disregard it, that's up to you. I mean, it is 110 euros cheaper, and while it's not as good, there's still a lot of money to be had in the F50 Pro, especially considering that this is 205 grams. And to put that into perspective, the X Crazy Fast Pro was 260 grams, whereas the Vapor 15 Pro, for instance, is 228 grams. So it is really light, again, for 150 euros. Would I choose the Elite every day of the week? But if you don't have that sort of money, it's a very, very strong option. So what's also changed from the Pro here is the overall shape of the boot. It is a little bit wider throughout, meaning that you get a slightly more democratic fit. It appeals to a bit more foot shapes, and it feels a bit more, should we say, cozy to wear compared to the Pro and especially the Elites. One thing Adidas has also changed is the outsole here. This is called the Sprint Plate 360. They've had a lot of fun naming these. And the base option is not just called FG anymore. It's now FG MG that kind of follows in the footsteps of Nike and Puma's hybrid options that you can use on multiple surfaces. And I think that's a pretty nice move from Adidas because the players that would typically be looking at the League boots would also usually not have, the desire to go out and spend money on multiple pairs for the different types of surfaces they're playing on. Now, what Adidas have done here is obviously they've made these red studs to indicate that something is special, which is cool. But to be fair, the stud shape and placement is the same as on the Pros and on the Elites, but the FGMG now has studs that are 2 millimeters shorter throughout. So they will be safer to wear on multiple different grounds. But on the other side it's not exactly inventing the wheel either. However, I do think that the Leagues here are, they're decent boots for the money. I could have wished for a slightly more sleek and streamlined sensation, being the fact that they are F50s, and also they're not exactly light either, 248 grams, but that is what it is. But if you are looking for something that gives you that fast aesthetic from the F50 Elite, but with a wider, more cozy and also sturdier sensation than the Elites, it's definitely worth a look. I do, however, think that the drop in quality from the Pro to the League is a lot bigger than the drop in quality from the Elite to the Pros. Especially because the drop in quality from the Pro is only 55 euros. And I know 55 euros is not exactly pocket change, but if you can find that in any way and buy the Pro instead of the League, the Pro just has a lot more value for money to it than the League, for me. And finally, that was pretty nice, we have the Club, which is 60 euros in this FXG variation. And again, corners have had to be cut. But as I always say with this price point here, it's kinda okay because the typical player looking for a club boot is not someone overly concerned with having the latest innovation. They're just looking for a pretty easy to wear, sturdy boot that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. And the Club falls into that category. See, here we also have a fiber touch upper that is pretty similar to what's on the League, but feels ever so slightly thicker. You have, cool cutouts on the side, so that's what it is. You have a free floating tongue, that's difficult to say here, that allows for a good amount of adjustability, and then you have this really thick, airy mesh in the heel that means that it wraps your foot really nicely, but then on the other hand, it's kind of chunky. Now underneath the boot here, we have the FXG outsole, which is basically another one of Adidas's hybrid outsoles that they say you can use on both firm ground, artificial ground, and hard ground pitches. Which is cool. I mean, it's probably a little bit too aggressive for me to feel good about using it on artificial grass, but at least the warranty is covering using it on AG, so there's that. Now, I would personally say that this is probably to be seen as like an entry-level boot, or something you should look at if your budget doesn't allow you to look at the better, more expensive models. But it is also evident for me that it is the cheapest option. It is what it is. So yeah, as I mentioned in the beginning, lots of options, and I haven't even mentioned the turf and indoor and other variations. So there's something for everyone, I think it's fair to say. Now, obviously for me, in the F50 line, it is all about the Elites. But I was pleasantly surprised actually by the quality of the Pro and the amount of value for money you get for 150 euros. So that's pretty good. And of course, if you're interested in either of these, you can buy all of the variation in the link to Unisport right over there. But not, of course, before you've told me which of the boots you would be looking at, which variation, all that in the comment section right down below. Of course, also, if you haven't done so already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel with the notifications on to get all the latest info and reviews and, deep dives of all the latest football boots out there. And if you like learning new football skills, maybe check the playlist right down there with those words. I'll be signing off. Cheerio.